Namaste. Today I want to talk about programming paradigms. Something that used to be very popular and a common course in most IT or computer science courses a few years back, but now more or less has disappeared from their syllabus because of there are so many topics to cover. So some of these courses have kind of gone out of quote unquote fashion. But it is a very important thing, according to me, that for any computer science person to be familiar with. So what does it actually mean? A paradigm is kind of like a way of thinking or an approach to something. So programming paradigm. So what does actually programming do? In programming, we are trying to communicate to a machine information about a problem that we want its help to solve. So whatever are the parameters, the constraints, the domain knowledge, or whatever that is involved in solving that problem, we try to communicate to the machine through some language framework. Okay. Today, most people are Java people or .NET people or Python people or Ruby people, and because of the constraints of not doing multiple languages, many people think that that is the way to talk to a machine or that is the only way to communicate to a machine. This is something that I think should change because one should understand that communicating to a machine can take different forms. Okay, and that's what programming paradigms try to do. So, in when you are trying to write a program about for any problem, you are trying to capture the information relevant to it. Now, how do you? And again, if you look at most programming languages from 50 years back to today, excluding one or two categories which I'll talk about later on, almost everything, the core concepts are quite similar. Every language has an if then else or if then statement for conditional branching. You have loops, while for repeat until or whatever. So basically simple loops and assignments, variables, types, and some notion of procedures. This is pretty much the same thing that we used to do in Fortran or COBOL in the olden days, to Pascal, C, to Java, to Python. All of these languages, you can see they follow the same formula, same core concepts. And really speaking, that is all that you really need in order to write a program. The rest of it is how to contain the complexity of a real life problem while communicating to the machine. So if your program is very elaborate, there are lots of procedures and we just to kind of interact with each other, lots of data to be processed and converted and all that, then if you just write it as a sequential code, it will become very unwieldy to to manage, to maintain, and to update. And that is where we bring in programming paradigms. So the initially from assembly language programming, that was to be the very olden days of programming, people moved on to what is called procedural programming. So that was the only programming mechanism at that time. And so in procedural programming, you were basically looking at the world in terms of a set of procedures, right? So a procedure to compute something, a procedure to print something, a procedure to read something, a procedure to calculate a function, or a bunch of these procedures, they constitute your worldview. And the data is primarily stored through whatever files or arrays and other structures that is very familiar to most of you. Now, this procedural view basically said that you first do this procedure, then do this, and then do this, and then do this, and each procedure can invoke other procedures, including the possibility of recursion. So this provided a very pretty smooth, clean way to organize your worldview. So the world was seen in terms of a lot of data and a lot of procedures which acted on the data. Okay, and that is what from Fortran and languages like Fortran kind of was the front runner to this. And then came languages like Pascal, which introduced a lot more cleanliness into programming. So Pascal is considered as structured programming, exemplar for it. And also, it introduced the concept of top-down refinement to organize the program development. So Pascal had this entire program being organized as a single program block. So the name of the program and all procedures are inside that block. So the concept of blocks itself came in around that time. But they were basically syntactic sugar to contain the complexity of putting in a lot of information to a program. Okay, and this was very popular. And then there are uh, apparently different languages like COBOL, which is actually quite similar to the same paradigm, but it had a more different syntactic sugar, more readable for a business user, and a whole bunch of languages which came around at that time, encompassing this paradigm. Okay, and then slowly one moved on to saying, okay, there are another ways of organizing your worldview, and that brought in what is called the object-oriented programming view. So, what is the difference? In object-oriented programming, you view the world as do you see the world as they are, in a sense, like there are lots of objects, there are instances, so you can have animals and specific animals of it, and there are the class called table, and you have a specific instances of table, and you have a class called a person, then you have individual person instances. So this concept of objects that you can see or even experience in the world, that became the core mechanism of representing the world. And so these objects, so I will talk about the object oriented concept, more the way object oriented paradigm in my next video. Okay, so we will then look at a lot of other development that came in. And so there is about 6 or 7 paradigms that it is good to know, and that will give you a feel about what actually programming is about, and what these paradigms are able to bring you, the plus and minus of them. Okay, so we'll see you in the next video.